Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Monday, October 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Wayzata Planning Commission. I hereby call this meeting to order. My name is Larissa Stockton and I serve as chair of the Planning Commission, and I have a few words about how to participate in this evening's meeting. The hybrid meeting information is as follows. For the Zoom meeting ID number is 842-5308-4569. Passcode 605825. Members of the public may attend this Planning Commission meeting in person, watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and the city's website at wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting, in advance, or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you'll be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You'll be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All comments must include your name and address. The city encourages questions and comments about items on the agenda, and when possible, requests you submit them in advance by emailing publiccomment@wayzata.org, calling city staff at 952-404-5323, or mailing Wayzata City Hall at 600 Rice Street East, Wayzata, Minnesota 55391. Attention, public comment. Great. Next on the agenda is the roll call. Director Gellner, would you please take the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Schwalbe.
Here.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Here.
Commissioner Douglas.
Here.
Chair Stockton.
Here.
Commissioner Severson.
Here.
And then Chair, please note that Commissioner Merriam and Elg are absent this evening.
Great. Noted. Thank you. Right. Next we have item 3, approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions or proposed changes to the agenda? And if not, may I have a motion to approve as presented this evening?
So moved.
It was a tie. Thank you, Commissioner Severson. Second,
Second.
Schwalbe. Further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes and the agenda is approved. Next, we have the approval of the consent agenda. This evening's consent agenda consists of 3 items. A, approval of meeting minutes of September 18th, 2023. B, approval of Planning Commission report and recommendation of approval for side yard setback and impervious surface variances at 308 Hampton Street South. And finally, C, acknowledgement of withdrawal for development application at 1903 Wayzata Boulevard East. Does any commissioner have any questions or comments on any items of the consent agenda or wish to pull for discussion? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. Further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. The consent agenda is approved. All right, moving very quickly, we're going to go on to the public hearing item. This evening we have one, which is to A, consider application for rear yard setback and impervious surface variances at 223 Gleason Lake Road. Do we have, Director Gellner or Planner Quarles, do we have something to walk through for this evening's application?
Yes. Planner Quarles will provide the presentation this evening, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good evening. Today we'll be talking about a proposal at 223 Gleason Lake Road for an impervious surface variance and a rear yard setback variance. We have both the owners and the applicant's representative in the audience with us tonight. The project is located up in the northeast corner of town over by Gleason Lake. And for a little bit more context, is situationed in this area of Gleason Lake Road where it's surrounded by a couple of properties that have accesses either from Hunter's Glen or from you'll see that 233 Gleason Lake right behind it has a shared driveway that runs through this property. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then 215 Gleason Lake Road sits to the south there. This neighborhood is in the R1 zoning district. It's pretty close to the R3 zoning district, but this whole side of the road is all one, and then similarly, they're all zoned guided 1 acre single family. In terms of existing conditions, this lot is about 18,000 feet, or about 0.41 acres. Please note that the minimum lot size for R1 is 40,000 square feet, which is about an acre. The home on the lot today was built in 1914 and has a footprint of about 1,660 square feet. It currently has a 1-stall, 321 square foot garage. You'll note that the current home doesn't conform to front or rear setbacks, and this is in part because it's oriented perpendicular to the road and the buildable area. You can see that Gleason Lake Road is over to the right of this image, actually, and then the home faces north. So it sort of sits on its side relative to Gleason Lake. And then in terms of the buildable area, I just wanted to note that when you apply the R1 setbacks, which are 20 feet on the sides and then 45 feet in the front and 50 feet in the rear, you get this buildable area. So you can see that how the house today already doesn't sit within that quite perfectly. These are pretty dated pictures. This is a tough one to get a picture of from the street because it's pretty well screened, both due to a fence and quite a lot of greenery. This picture I pulled from actually the Wayzata Historical Society's website because, as I mentioned, that home was built in 1914, so over 100 years old. The proposal is to take their existing garage and expand it from 1 to 2 stalls. You'll see that the sizes listed are a little bit larger than a normal 1 or 2 stall garage, and we'll talk about that a little more later. They also want to create an owner's suite, which does not require, I'll correct myself on that actually. It won't require a setback variance, but it will contribute to the impervious surface variance, as well as a screened porch. And then because they'll be asking for an impervious surface variance, they'll need to be adding some stormwater mitigation in what's technically their side yard. So they want to take their current non-conforming hardcover from 27.6% to 31.9%. Those are both above the limit in that district of 25%. And then the rear yard setback, they'll want to reduce that from the required 50 feet, which they currently encroach on a little bit, to 21.9 feet from that property line. So this is their proposal. You can see that the existing house is hatched in, and then everything that they're planning to do is colored in. That red is where they're going to be reconfiguring the driveway. That yellow to the left is their new addition, which is that garage. You can see that it's angled to sort of take advantage of that driveway configuration. To the south is that proposed owner's suite, and then in green is that proposed new deck, and then the floor plan. Just to the right of that image is where you can see how all of that fits in with their current room layout. This is the north elevation of the home. So this would be if you were standing in their shared driveway and looking south. You'd see their current garage, which sits pretty low, and then the addition garage space is shown in yellow. For the impervious surface variance, I mentioned that they're already non-conforming and they're looking to increase that non-conformity. That's generally driven by the increase in the area of the home. Sometimes we see that increase because the driveway is really changing a lot. This is actually cutting down on that overall driveway size a bit because that addition is sort of taking up some of that existing driveway space. And then in terms of stormwater management, they're planning on adding some drain tile in their rear yard, or functionally their rear yard, but actually their side yard to the south. And that'll provide adequate capacity for that hardcover above 25%. This home is in the Shoreland Overlay District, which, as you probably know from quite a few previous applications we've looked at recently, the limit in that district is 25%. Conveniently, that's the exact same limit as there is in R1, so not much to talk about there. I just wanted to note the difference in how the driveway is configured between the current condition and now. On the left side is the current condition. You can see that they've got a turnaround area leading up to their current garage, and then in the proposed condition, that'll all be sort of smoothed out into one driveway pad. For their rear yard setback variance, as noted, there's a 50-foot setback requirement in the R1 district, and they're requesting to be about 22 feet away from their rear yard line. As I mentioned, the home is currently perpendicular to the road, meaning that their rear yard is actually more acting as their south side. They noted that the addition is angled to reduce the setback request. I think it'll be up to the Planning Commission to decide whether that angle actually solves the issue of the setback request adequately. And then I just wanted to note that the current condition is also a little bit over that setback line today. Right now, they're about 46.5 feet from that line. And again, they're asking to be reduced down to about 22 feet away from that line. In terms of department comments, fairly light. They found their stormwater management plan adequate with the drain tile. Like with any stormwater management plan, they'll need to have a stormwater facilities maintenance agreement, making sure that they keep that up over the years. We'll also be requiring a tree preservation plan, which makes sure that any of those proposed stormwater improvements don't negatively impact trees on the site. None of their additions to the home are proposed to impact any trees, but that drain tile is what we're going to want to manage because that sort of sits in the yard. And then, as with any project, we'll require an as-built survey to make sure that they build what they're approved for. For neighborhood notification, the city sent out their notice, the applicant sent out theirs as well. We don't require a neighborhood meeting for variances alone. I did get one verbal positive public comment. It was just a neighbor up the street who called me on the phone. I encouraged him to submit a written comment as well. He did not do that, but it was a good conversation. And then we also received one written public comment that was negative towards the project. That came in after the packet deadline, so that's printed out on your dais and then also available up front. In the future, we'll include that in the council packet as well. But their concerns as the neighbor to the south was that they were concerned about the aesthetic and the overall architectural design of the addition. They were concerned that it, maybe wasn't super, congruent with the house today. Some concerns about existing noise, and then overall wondering if maybe there were some different location options for the proposed garage. So our normal set of questions, asking, is the proposal consistent with the comp plan? Are these reasonable? Are the issues that the landowner is facing due to circumstances that are because of the way the property is laid out or something that they created? And then would each variance potentially alter, the character of the neighborhood? The applicant's reasons for these questions are that they see that the lot is undersized for the zoning district. They see that shared driveway is contributing some to impervious surface, as is a public path along Gleason Lake Road that actually does sit on their property quite a bit. And then the existing location of the house, as we mentioned a couple of times. So after we talk through all that, you'll ask us to prepare a report and recommendation, either showing that you are in favor of the project or against it, for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Planner Quarles. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time for staff in light of what we just heard? Yep, Commissioner Douglas.
I think we talked about this the other day on the phone, the impervious surface. And the total current is 27.6. And my question, does that include the 2.2 of the shared driveway and the 1.9 of the impervious, which would bring it down to 23.5 if you take that out?
The 2.2 of the shared driveway and then the 1.9 of which item?
Of the public trail.
Yes, that includes both of those.
So they are over now, but it's because of the shared driveway and the trail.
Yes, if they didn't have that sort of westernmost portion of the shared driveway and they didn't have the shared trail, they'd be under today.
Okay, so that would bring it down to 23.5. The new is 31.9. Does that also include that 4.1? Because if it doesn't, it would bring it down to 27.8. If it does, include the, So should we look at that as, I'm just curious if that includes that 4.1.
Yep, that'll include that. So the math being that even if you took, from the proposal, even if you took off that 4.1, they would be over the 25.
Be 27.8 instead. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Yep, Commissioner Severson.
Do you know the history of why this is such an undersized lot? Guessing because it's from 1914, but do you know?
As I understand it, and I think, potentially the architect and maybe the homeowners can also speak to the history of the home, I believe that this was originally one larger estate that was split up into a couple of lots. If I recall from the one public comment correctly, I believe that home to the south was actually the barn of this home. So I think it was one estate that was split up into a couple of lots, but that split probably happened before we were talking a lot about lot size minimums.
Okay. And then can you just confirm the impervious surface, it's 25%?
That's the limit,
That's
yes.
the limit? Okay. Thank you.
If you were building a new home on that lot today, in this area of town, is there a requirement for garage capacity?
For single-family homes, I would have to double-check. I think at maximum, we would require one enclosed stall. I know that for multifamily, we require one enclosed stall, but I don't believe anybody's required to have two.
No, okay.
So I have a question. I'm just trying to get my bearings on how close everything is there, because I did go into the driveway. And the house that's actually on the lake, but I think part of the shared driveway, so that would actually be to the west. Okay. There's a lot of gardens, and I don't know where the mowed lawn of this particular lot, 223, is in comparison to, where does their lot leave off and where does the next house begin? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a lot of greenery between the two houses, but who owns that greenery?
Let me go back a couple of slides to the satellite. We can try and get a good image of it. Sorry, I hate scrolling back this fast. There we go.
Okay.
It's a little tough to tell because I think Hennepin County tries to take these pictures in the fall in order to be able to see everything the best.
It actually looks like a lot less room in person.
There's a heavy shadow line there, too.
Pardon me?
Sorry to interrupt. I was distracted by the heavy shadow on the property. It almost looks like a structure, but it's not.
It's just a shadow?
Yeah, next to
Okay.
the parked car.
Okay.
The pad.
Because off that back, where the shadow is, that is where they're planning on building that screen porch, correct?
The shadowed area is actually where that second garage stall would go.
Oh, okay.
So you can kind of see, it's a little tough on this picture, but you can see to the, and we say south, obviously relatively, because the whole thing is askew, but you can sort of see a deck on that picture.
Yeah, I do.
That's where that new owner's suite and that screen porch would go.
Okay, so there's a deck there already,
Yes.
but now there will be a screen porch, plus there will be an owner suite above it.
I would have to double check if those are actually stacked. I think they're next to each other. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so you see where the car is there?
Yep.
So when this is all done, that car will just go around the driveway and then pull right in, right? And there's room for, well, there's already room for one. And so that's the new addition. It's big for a one-car garage.
Yeah.
You said something about that earlier when you were giving the presentation, something about it's an oversized garage.
Yes, because it's angled relatively, it ends up, there we go. You can see that yellow area. Because it's angled, you end up getting a lot more space sort of on the south end than you would, than if it were just in line with the garage today. And if you look
Okay.
on the floor plan in particular, you can get a better idea of how that would shake out.
Okay, so can we go over to the part where it says addition new deck? This is the part now that will be facing on that side, 215 Gleason Lake Road, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And how far is that going to change? Can you remind me? The setback?
Do you mean the setback from the house today or the deck?
Well, I guess that whole structure, that whole yellow and green area,
Mm-hmm.
how much is that going to change?
I would have to dive in to figure out the exact number of feet. I don't think it's terribly different from the current deck. It's a pretty large deck today,
Okay,
but I don't have an exact answer for you quite yet. I'd need a couple of minutes.
okay. Can you see where there might be concern about noise and interference with the next lot? It's kind of tight in there, actually, when you go in there.
Yeah, it would end up being kind of an interesting discussion because they've already got that deck there.
Yeah,
And as far as I can tell, it looks like what's happening is the deck is actually getting a little smaller as it moves to the east.
okay. Okay. Thank you,
Commissioner Douglas?
appreciate it.
I have a question on 215 Gleason. Do we have any idea what their setback is from this lot line?
I am not going to have an exact number because it's not surveyed, but certainly a lot further than the lot at 223. I'd have to dive into the county property map to try to get you an approximate number.
215, okay.
I just did a really quick, like, rough measurement. It's got to be at least 75 feet away.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that shadow, go back to that next picture that shows the new addition, the yellows and the, so really that shadow, if you squared that off in that angled garage, there'd be a couple of triangles added, but not, the shadow would fit, I'm trying to figure out how it would fit into that addition.
I think I would recommend maybe some other images. Are you trying to locate where like on this image, is this image helpful to locate?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that that shadow kind of indicates where it's going to be, is what I'm saying.
Oddly, yeah.
Yeah,
I
oddly
actually
it
thought the
does.
shadow was originally the structure of the building because it's so solid.
Yeah, I did too, and then I went, oh no, that's the shadow.
And now that we realize there's actually a void there, it kind of creates the ability to imagine that's where the second garage goes. I
Right,
think
thank
that's
you
what's happening.
Clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yes,
Can you pull up the shadow picture?
I can go back to the shadow picture.
I'll go back shadow. So if you're looking west towards 233, with the addition, if this is approved, the addition gets put on, as indicated, the new addition is still 21.9 feet from property line, if I read that.
Yes, the new addition comes a lot closer to that rear line, yes.
Yeah, but still 21 feet away
yeah,
from there. Right.
and just the
Okay.
point. And the point of it would be.
Yeah,
right?
the point of it,
Yeah.
right.
So it fades away essentially from the, we're getting into shadows and fading here, okay. Any other clarification questions? All right. Thank you, staff and commissioners. At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward and address the commission. Please state your name and address for the record and your role if you're an advisor or other part of the applicant's team. And if you can keep your presentation to around 10 minutes, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
All right, hello. There we go. My name is Tommy Everson. I live at 5301 Glen Bray Circle in Edina. I am the architect on the project. My company is Everson Architect. I'd like to also note that homeowner is an architect as well. John here works at Cunningham Group. So the homeowners have been living in this, they've lived in this house for, 30 years?
Can you repeat that on the microphone so
So
that?
they moved, so Krista, one of the homeowners, she's been in this house since 1979. She grew up in this house. And then they purchased the home in the early 90s, 95. And then they've done a few projects over the years and raised kids in this house. And now they're looking to basically improve it so they can retire in this house and stay in it for as long as they can. And so a big part of this is this master suite addition. And I think there's a little confusion in the presentation about where that's located. That's actually going to be built directly on top of the existing family room, correct? Family room and garage. So that's not expanding the footprint at all, that's just going up. The screened porch addition off the, let's call it this, we call that the south side, kind of southwest. That is basically going on top of where the existing deck is, and then there's a new deck off to the east of that. And then the garage, the new garage stall is getting bumped out to the south on the lakeside. Not south, sorry, the west on the lakeside. So the reason for the garage addition, there's a single garage on the house now, single stall. It's very tight, it's very short, not a lot of room for storage. It's also, since the house was built in the early 1900s, there's just not a lot of storage space in the house at all. So the reason to angle the garage was kind of twofold. One reason was to try to add a little bit more storage, but the other reason was just for accessibility. So we have that shared driveway, and knowing that we were already over for our impervious surface coverage, we didn't want to waste a lot of that on driveway. So if we were to straighten this out, it kind of, maybe the, if you got rid of the triangular section in the middle, you could say that we're further away from that setback line, but more of the bulk of the mass of the structure would be, facing the setback. But really, what would end up happening there is the driveway would have to stretch out. So we'd end up with just as much impervious surface coverage if we were to straighten out the garage, and then we lose the potential for storage, and it just makes it a lot harder to get in and out of. So that was kind of a driver early on. It was both to save on hardcover and to help out with storage and accessibility. I think there were a few questions about, the neighbor's concern on the, sorry, I keep getting turned around here, but because when I look at this image, I want to say south, but the neighbor to the southwest, they're pretty far away, right? I think we said they're about 75 feet away. And the addition that's happening for the screened porch and the deck, those are within the setback. Those are not over the setback. So those would be permissible. The only thing we're looking at there is hardcover. Those are also single story. The screened porch is only a single story structure, so I don't think visually it'll impact the neighbors to the southwest. One other thing to note about that garage addition, it's also single story. So when there's a complaint about how this is going to look, I don't know how visual, how imposing this is going to look towards the neighbor when they're 75 feet back and this is such a low structure. The only area that's going up is over the existing house. And this doesn't affect the lake view from that property either, so I'm not quite sure what the concern is there. Starting off when we had our conversations with Val, just to see if this had any validity with what we're proposing. I think the biggest hardship or problem that we're running into is the hardcover, and that this is being in the R1 district, because I think the minimum lot size was 40,000 square feet, and we're really undersized for that. So there's not a whole lot we can do in terms of expanding the house with how it's already been sited. And especially when it comes to adding a garage, I think one of the complaints had said, well, maybe there's another spot for the garage. And I would say, well, you haven't looked at the actual drawings, because there really isn't, especially if we want to have an attached garage. There's not, there really aren't any other practical places to put it, having the shared driveway where it's located. The other issues that were brought up that were considerable in terms of the hardcover is not only is the lot undersized, we also are dealing with that shared driveway and then the public path. So we kind of get a double whammy here. So I think the requests we're asking for are pretty modest, and if this was a 40,000 square foot lot, we wouldn't be standing here right now.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. I have a question. Are you complete? Yeah. What is intended to go? I have a couple questions actually. What's intended to go on top of the garage addition? That's flat. That's single.
Nothing. That's just going to be a flat roof.
Flat roof.
Any deck or anything on top of that.
Okay. And so no access to it or anything.
Correct. Yep.
And the garage doors, from this elevation, there's going to be two separate, distinct doors. Is that right?
Correct.
I'm just curious. Have you considered? I agree. This seems to be the most logical location for a garage. I don't know where else you really put it. However, I was wondering if you did straighten rather than angle and did a double wide single door, and to get the additional storage that you would lose from straightening it, bumped the north wall forward a little bit. But had you considered that idea at all, and if, did it
Yeah,
not
and I
work?
think the bigger issue there is, it's cost, but it's structural, so there's a lot of load that's gonna be coming down in that corner of the house. So if we were to take that corner out, we'd have to put a lot of steel in there to try to support a double wide. So even if we were to straighten this out, we'd still want to have 2 single doors. It's also the door was purchased a little more recently too, and it's in really nice condition, so it'd be a shame to have to waste it and throw it out.
Yeah, but, so you're saying you can't span the distance for a single wide? That takes double, there's a,
I'm saying if we
Architectural?
straighten this out, basically what would happen is in this drawing would be the northwest corner of the existing house. There's gonna be a lot of load coming down there, especially
Yes.
after we put that second story on, or the story and a half. So in order to stretch from the existing opening all the way to a new opening, if this was straight, we'd have to put a lot of steel in there. And it'd be some gymnastics that would have to be sorted out to make that work.
okay, so structurally, it doesn't work to do it that way. But you could straighten
Anything's
it.
possible, but it wouldn't be a very practical solution.
But then if you didn't have a single door and you had 2 separate doors, you could put the massing weight in between them, correct?
Correct, yeah, we could keep that corner intact.
So then in that situation, you could straighten it out, bump it forward, and put, with 2 separate doors, have a structural load taken in between.
Correct, yeah, then the concern there is we'd be asking probably for more hardcover at that point. Just due to how the driveway would have to angle to come in.
But it would alleviate the, any kind of concerns about setbacks to the neighbor.
It would still be over the setback. And really, the neighbor that filed the complaint that's to the southwest, we're not over any of the setbacks on that side of the property. The setback that's in question here is on the west side.
Thank you.
We'd be over it either way, because the house is already over that western setback. If you look at the drawing here where that dashed line is, it says setback, and it goes through, it already clips the west side of the existing house. So no matter what we add on, it's going to be over.
We can't hear you, so when he's finished, you can come and speak, or if you wanted to join him, that's up to you for your presentation. I mean, I would have thought, you're the applicant, right? So in theory, you're both representing you.
What I want to say, number one, is the neighbor at 215 doesn't live in that house. She lives in New Hampshire, and she spends maybe 2 or 3 weeks a year in that house. And also, she has planted a large row of bushes to block out our house completely. So I feel like that's pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions for the applicant? Architect? No. Wonderful. Okay, then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
the
your time. Now I'd like to turn to the public hearing. Before we begin, I'd like to make a couple of comments about the public hearing. It is a time for us to listen to you, our community, about the approval requests we're considering. It's an important part of official process that allows the public to participate. Any questions asked during the public hearing will be held to the end of the hearing and may be addressed by staff at that point. With that said, I would now like to go to the public hearing for the application for rear yard setback and impervious surface variances at 223 Gleason Lake Road. Is there anyone? Yes, please. Yes, please. And state your name and address for the record.
Richard Bennett, I'm the homeowner at 100 Hunters Glen Road, just to the north of the parcel. And in reviewing the materials provided and the presentation, I don't have any specific concerns. I'm just looking for more information as far as, proposed timeline for the project, and, for the architect, any anticipated impacts to the north lot. including any stormwater considerations or impacts to the north. In reviewing the materials, I'm just north of the shared driveway, and my backyard backs up to the parcel, so I didn't notice any impacts to our property, but just for informational purposes, wanted to confirm that.
Thank you. Imagine those direct questions can be answered at another time, and some of them were already answered in the packet, but thank you, and I'm sure that the applicant will be happy to get back to you with that detail. Is there anyone else who would like to speak here today? If not, is there anybody on Zoom?
There is not, Chair.
Okay, if there's no one on Zoom, thank you, everybody. Seeing that there's no one else, I'm going to close the public hearing. Wonderful. Okay, well, commissioners, let's have some dialogue and thoughts about what we've seen tonight and how we see this coming together. Yeah,
I have another question for staff, if I can.
sure.
Can you give me a sense for what zoning district this lot would fit in? Like, is it R3, R3A? And what so if this was in the proper, right, if this was zoned properly for the size of the lot, where would that go?
My guess would that be if we, usually throughout town, you don't see a lot of sprinklings of individual zoning districts, but if we went through that exercise, this would probably be an R2 lot, which has a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet.
And what are the setbacks and impervious surface for a lot like that size?
The minimum setbacks for the home would be 25 feet in the front yard, 10 feet in the side yard, and 20 feet in the rear yard. And then the impervious surface limitation would be 30%.
Thank you.
Commissioner Douglas.
Could you go back to one of the first pictures that shows the aerial view, that we can see the foliage and that type of thing? I pulled in your driveway today, but it was hard to see because there's so much foliage on the land. So the 215, it looks like there's quite a barrier of foliage or trees there also, okay? All right, that answers my question, thank you.
Well, I don't really have any questions in particular, but when I read the packet and looked at the photos, it seems like a really nice addition to this particular house to enhance what's already there. It is sort of tight, I get that, and that's what my feeling was when I was in there. But seeing this now with how far away 215 Gleason Lake Road is, just given how far the building is, I actually think that variance-wise and setback-wise, I don't have a problem. I like this project.
Commissioner Sorensen?
So I think this commission needs to be careful every time we look at a variance because we have this criteria for a good reason. In this case, there are many unique circumstances to this application, given the shared driveway, given the trail in front, given the orientation of the lot, given the size of the lot. And it seems like it's an existing non-conforming situation, which they inherited. And so we're trying to apply, 40,000 2-acre lot criteria to a 17,000 acre lot. I think that's where some of the typical criteria we have for impervious and rear setbacks result in needing a variance. So as far as the setback goes, I think it is important to realize, which we have, or the conversation included, what the real impact is to the neighboring homes. And if we're 90-plus feet to the south and probably more to the west, and given the character of the neighborhood. I'm not overly bothered by the variance of the setbacks. And the impervious surface, I'd say the same. Interesting that this would fit setbacks in the R2 area, and it would comply with the impervious surface also. And like was mentioned by Commissioner Douglas, if you accommodate the trail and the shared driveway, you're 27.8% versus the 25. So it's non-conforming now, it would still be non-conforming. So all that said, you know, is it reasonable? Does it affect the essential character? Is it consistent with the comp plan? I think it does, and I like the fact that we're taking an existing structure and working with that rather than building something new, which would be more intrusive to the neighbors.
Agreed, yeah. Commissioner Douglas, do you have things to
I'll
add?
just say ditto to Commissioner Sorensen. And this reminds me of our last meeting where we had the same issue. The house was built in 1914. We needed variances for impervious and setbacks, and it was smaller than the normal lot. And I liked the comparison that you brought up for the R2. That really focused in my mind. And I'm just delighted that they're keeping one of our older delightful homes in Wayzata. And I felt the same about the last one, that it's better than tearing down and starting all over. And we thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Commissioner Severson, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
All right, great. Well, I think these comments have been, really well articulated, and I agree. At the end of the day, we're looking at whether or not it's a reasonable variance, and if the conditions are unique to the property and in line with the comp plan. And I think, as Ken articulated, it does fall into those three categories. There's a lot of uniqueness to this property. I also love the fact that we're keeping an existing property and working with it to modernize it, and what a wonderful heritage. It's just like, I'm sure there's just DNA is in the walls, so that there's care to, the thought that you're putting into it. I think other than that, we've probably reached the ability to have a motion. Commissioner Douglas.
The Planning Commission directs staff to prepare a draft Planning Commission report of recommendation with appropriate findings reflecting recommendations for approval of the variances for 223 Gleason Lake Road for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting.
May I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. Any further discussion? I'm going to do it, and all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, it's unanimous, and the ayes have it. The motion passes. The draft report and recommendation will be on the consent agenda at our next meeting, and after adoption, go to City Council for consideration. Thank you, applicant, staff, and members of the public for participating in tonight's meeting. And next, we can go over to any other items, review of development activities, and B, Planning Commission meeting schedule. Director Gellner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Our next meeting was scheduled for October 16th, and that is now canceled due to a lack of agenda items. So our next meeting will be on Monday, November 6th. And then just please note that the next council meeting is next week on October 10th, Tuesday, October 10th. It would typically be tomorrow, but it's moved back 1 week. Those are all the updates I have for you tonight on scheduling.
Okay, great. Then thank you, everyone, for participating in tonight's meeting. That concludes everything on the agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Severson. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Douglas. Further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, nay? Ayes have it, motion passes, and the October 2nd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting is adjourned.